Hey there. In this video, you're going to hear from two professional data analysts talking about how they use Microsoft Excel as a primary data analysis tool. They're going to walk you through why Excel is such a good fit if you want to work with data. They'll even talk to you about where you should start learning, what are the most important features that everybody should build the foundation with, what their favorite tips and tricks are, and pitfalls you can avoid. And they'll tell you where you can get some free data sets to start practicing this stuff and build skills right away. It's going to be a great talk. Hope you'll get a lot out of it. Enjoy. Excel was my first love in data. I know you two are here because you feel very strongly that it should be everybody's first stop as well. So we're all on the same page. But for anybody who might not know, the full argument of why Excel should be the first stop, I'd love to hear, what do you guys think makes it such a good fit? And maybe, Enrique, if you could start with this one, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think aside from the user friendliness of it all and how it introduces you to a lot of fundamental concepts, which I'm sure we'll get into, I love how you mentioned, John, that it's, the first stop that everyone should have. And I think the reason for that is that if it's your first and only stop, then I think you'd be set, even if that's as far as you ever went. And I don't think you can say that for any other data tool out there. And I think the reason for that is that not just all analysts know it. I think Excel has like over 1 billion users now around the world. But more importantly, I think all leaders, all decision makers, all stakeholders know Excel as well. So I think it's just a great link between the work that you're doing and who you're communicating with it, and everyone having just this solid understanding, at least of the basics and foundations of it, to get you far along in your career. So I think that's my pitch. If Excel is if it's the only tool you ever learned to use, then you'd be perfectly fine as a data analyst. Although I do encourage
that's pretty fantastic. Sonali, are you on the same page? Should Excel be the first stop? And maybe you could kind of contrast, like if somebody were to pick something else, how would that be a misstep? I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will agree that Excel should be the first step. I will disagree that it should be only stop, though, especially because as we're hearing a lot of people in the market, in the current job market, I should say, there's a lot of competition. So you don't want to just stop at one tool. I will say learning one fundamental tool that's accessible to everyone, that's going to set you up for success versus trying to learn Python, SQL right off the bat if you don't have any technical background. I think at that point, you're setting yourself up for, I don't want to say failure, but just more delays. I think you should have a solid foundation. And I think Excel really helps you build that solid foundation that you can continue to build on.
Yeah, awesome. I actually agree with that as well. And I think the cool thing about Excel is that on that foundation, it really does enable you to pick up those later tools in a much easier fashion, because you start getting used to, data structures. You're working with tables, you're working with rows and columns, which will help you with queries, with SQL. You're even, using joins, right? I guess they're always left joins, but you're using VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP to bring tables together, which you'll use in other tools as well. It allows you to do, data cleaning and manipulation in a more hands-on manner, which really helps at first because you can actually touch the data. You can sort it with a few clicks. You're not going to be able to do that with other tools like SQL, maybe with Python. Granted, you probably do it with Power BI. And I think it's a great first introduction, even just into logic and coding with Excel formulas, to start, learning how computers process data and how they make calculations. And I think that will really help you as you move on to more complex, I guess, languages, we could call them, like DAX, like SQL, maybe even Python. So yeah, I think Excel sets you up for success. You have Python in Excel now as well, if you want to get started with some pandas.
Yep, got it all. Too. It's awesome. So yeah, hopefully the audience is mostly convinced that Excel is a great place to start. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you guys bought in? It sounded like a few people in the audience are already saying, yes, that's where I'm started. So I'm on the right track, which is great to hear. But love to hear if anybody has any counterpoints or if our two guests convinced you. For the next question I want to throw, I'd love to hear from both of you again. Maybe we could start with Sonali this time. Let's say you had somebody who was a bright person just starting out in data and had never touched Excel before, but they know Excel's where they should start. What would you advise that they start working on in Excel specifically on like day one? Like, what are the first few things that they should be learning in Excel for data analysis specifically?
Yeah. Before I mention that, I do want to say, like, make sure you know what your learning style is. If it's through reading, if it's through practices, if it's through audio or video. For me, audio and video works. If I'm reading something, I'm going to forget it. So I need to make sure I'm looking at what's happening and then practicing it as well. So just understand what works for you. And then secondary is what you should start out with is very basic aggregation. I did not know how to use Excel apart from aggregation before I got my first role into analytics. And so start off aggregation, understand what the surface, there's a different word, I can't remember right now, but what it looks like, understand what each button does. And from there, pull in smaller data sets. Don't try to go big. You're just starting out. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. So start with something small. Aggregations, I would suggest actually moving into VLOOKUPs after that, and then pivot tables. Those are the main foundations that I would make sure that you understand before you start looking into logical functions afterwards. So that's where my take is. That's how I started out too, and practice all of it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice there. Enrique, anything else to add, or anything else you would point them to next after those pieces?
I think I'd agree with that framework. I think an important piece for me that really helped me build confidence in at least feeling like a more proficient Excel user is just learning some basic keyboard shortcuts to feel like you're, whizzing through the spreadsheet, your basic controls to, jump around the tables. One that always helped me a lot was Control-Shift-L, actually, to toggle the filter buttons on and off. And then you can just navigate with the arrows. And I think it's Alt-arrow down to like open up the little window for sorting, and you can just navigate that. I think we have a YouTube. I know I have a YouTube video on that that I can point you for reference. But I think Excel shortcuts can go a long way into at least feeling and giving you confidence that you're an Excel expert and just working a lot more efficiently. I'd agree with Sonali on XLOOKUPs for joins. I do think that logical functions help too. I think if you're going to get started with formulas, there's so many that it can be easy to be overwhelmed. So focus on just using formulas to help you create new calculated columns. Be that with XLOOKUP because you need to join data, or with if statements because you need to make certain conditional logic to create new columns. And then from that, once you have the table and the structure that you need, just use pivot tables to aggregate. You don't need to get fancy with any other complicated formulas. Pivot tables will mostly get you all the calculations you need. And then from there, I will say learn a few basic charts to learn to visualize and communicate data. You can get along just fine with just bar, columns, and line charts, I'd say. You can try to get fancy. I'd say scatter plots are important. Histograms are important. But beyond that, it's just vanity for me.
That's awesome. I mean, so I'll give my quick anecdote is the first 5 years of my career as a data analyst, I did not use any other technical tools other than Excel. And you guys are basically describing the exact same things that I was doing, kind of using lookups to manage it as a multi-table database, logical functions, pivot tables, charts, and graphs. That was it. I didn't know how to do Power Query. I think I'm kind of old. You could probably tell, but Power Query I don't even think was available at the time. So eventually I had to learn how to use SQL because the data sets got too big and all that. But I had a 5-year career doing just what they're talking about. And I still use Excel so much every single day. It's phenomenal. So yeah, this fantastic. I'd love for the next question. I'd love to hear. So you guys just talked about the things that people should do when they're starting out. What are some of the things that people get wrong when they're starting about? Like what are some mistakes that folks tend to make? Sonali, maybe you could kick this one off.
Yeah, I think where my mind initially goes to is like trying to do too much too fast. And it's something that I've previously just hinted on is trying to think that you can learn everything within a day or within a week or, become an Excel expert in a week. I would say that I'm still learning, and it's been 4+ years of me using Excel. And there's always nuances that come along, and you can always figure out a different way of doing something better and making it more efficient. I think that's like the first thing that comes to my mind is just trying to do too much and pace yourself, build your own timeline and build your own structure of what you want to focus on this week, what you want to focus on next week, and keep practicing and don't overwhelm yourself so you don't quit.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Enrique, what would you add to common pitfalls?
I can tell you the mistakes I made early on. I kind of touched on this already, but it was trying to learn VBA. I think for some reason, and I think it's still kind of out there, that people think that VBA is like the Excel expert stamp for some reason. It's definitely what I felt I had to do to kind of, go to the next level. So I started out just trying to learn how to code macros, right? And it got to the point where the problem when you're just starting out is that you still don't know what you don't know. So it can be easy to think that VBA is just this solution that will accomplish anything for you, and that's all you'll ever need. And there was one point where I was using macros to accomplish what a VLOOKUP function would have accomplished, but I just didn't know that VLOOKUP existed, funnily enough. So I was just like trying to build macros for everything, and it was absolutely unnecessary. And I felt like I was just this Excel expert, where really I just knew nothing. So I think it's important to detach yourself from thinking that macros are what you need to take your career to the next level. Whenever I talk to my friends, it's still what they say, like, I'm pretty good with Excel, but I still need to learn macros. No, you don't. Well, at least you most likely don't. I'm not going to say that they're terrible. I know people have some good niche use cases for them for their unique applications, but I think stick with the foundations. One thing I'd add to the previous skills, get comfortable working with dates in Excel as well. I think that's a very key skill. And I think it's one that, especially for date and for time functions, AI is your best friend, right? Either ChatGPT or Copilot, now that it's integrated into Excel, can help kind of bridge a lot of those gaps, especially because it's very easy to know exactly what you want to do in Excel with date and text, but sometimes it's harder to accomplish. So it's really where you can leverage AI there. So I think, yeah. The other thing I will say, and it kind of has to do with what Sonali was saying about practicing, is a common mistake, especially when taking all these courses and learning all these skills, is to learn without applying, because it's just hard for these things to stick if you're not putting them into real practice. I think one thing about courses is that because they are handheld, it can be easy to think that you're picking up a lot of these skills without actually doing so. So I think trying to put these in practice in a scenario where you're kind of doing it out on your own, even if it's a very easy problem that you're trying to solve, will really take you a long way.
I love it. So one thing that both of you said, I mean, you overlapped on a number of things, but one of the things that you both suggested was like, make sure you're getting your hands dirty and practicing. Don't just watch videos. Don't just read. Like, you have to get some data sets. You think of it like building muscles. You have to actually put in the work and build those muscles. And you're never going to, even if Sonali and Enrique are the best instructors in the world, if you just watch them, you're never going to learn. You need to do it yourself as well. And so I love that. So maybe for the next question, there's one that really ties into that. If people want to get some awesome data sets to practice with, where would you point them to? Maybe Enrique, you could start this one.
Yeah, I'm a little biased, but I'd always point people towards our data challenges. You don't have to actively participate. I know it can be hard to put yourself out there and showcase your work, especially when it means going shoulder to shoulder with just really skilled analysts out there. Yeah. But I think it's just look at the data. It's a great way of grabbing a data set that is mostly business related, and that already comes with a problem to solve, right? Because a lot of the time, if you're just working at a data set without that initial push or direction, it's very easy to get analysis paralysis and not know what to do. So I think that's what makes challenges so unique, is that they come with a data set and the problem to solve. And you don't need to participate in the active one. If you go to our challenges page at Maven, you can look at all the historical challenges, pick the one that interests you the most, and just try to solve that problem, right? And the great thing about it is that here there's no hand-holding, but there is inspiration that you can get from other people that have participated. So I think I definitely encourage people to do that. I know we'll have Marjolaine on for another session with Aaron later in the week. I think she's hopefully a big advocate of challenges. I know she's talked about it a lot in the past, and I think it's because it has allowed her to just upskill so much more than I think people will ever anticipate. I love seeing some progressions of folks like Marjolaine, where you'll see their first project and their more recent ones, and you can just tell how much they've improved just by practicing in those scenarios. So yeah, that's my pitch for Maven Data.
Yeah, it's a great pitch, and Enrique, I dropped links to the challenge page and the data playground page. I put those in the chat for anybody who wants to see more about what Enrique's talking about. So Sonali, how about you? Other places, and you have to say something that's not Maven Analytics related.
Yeah.
So we're going to make it a little bit harder.
Darn. I was going to actually say, oh, Maven Analytics, but one of the reasons why I would say that is if you're learning in a community, I think that helps because you can look, as Enrique mentioned, you can look at other people as inspiration, but even if you don't want to put your work out there, you can use it to compare what you put together so you can catch your mistakes and figure out, oh, how did you do that? Let me go ahead and try to replicate it. And obviously don't copy work, but, replicate it for your own practices. There's a lot of free data sets. For personally, what I've relied on is Gen AI or just Google searches, quite frankly. And other subscriptions that you can sign up for where you get weekly or monthly challenges that you can partake in. But for me, again, I've tried to rely on Gen AI, just giving it prompts like, this is the type of dashboard, this is the type of work I want to do. So recently I gave it prompt, like I want to create a dashboard on TA Analytics. So give me a data set that includes XYZ columns. So giving it columns that I want to include and answer or questions that I want to answer and have it create problems in those data sets so I can go ahead and practice my skills. So you can also customize it using those prompts in Gen AI and have it like downloadable version. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but practice it and then see what works.
Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't tried try to get LLMs to create data sets myself. I'm definitely going to try that. That sounds really cool. Another one in the comments here, Steve posted data.world, and I would definitely recommend data.world is awesome. Another one that's pretty similar to data.world is Kaggle. Kaggle is great too. And usually what I'll say to people, for all the reasons that you said, Enrique, being in the challenges or the data playground are really good, especially if you're kind of just starting out, because they give you specific questions to answer. You won't get paralyzed by thinking like, what should I do with this data? It kind of gives you the right direction. Where I think data.world and Kaggle, which we don't have any affiliation with at Maven, we just think they're awesome. Where those ones win is like, if you needed a very specific data set, like you said, hey, I want data on like hotels in France or something, that even might be a little too specific, but honestly, Kaggle and data.world may have it. They have so many. So if you're excited about a specific industry that you want to work on, so you want a very niche project, you probably won't be able to get that at Maven Analytics Data Playground because we're just like, we're a little smaller in terms of the number of data sets we have, but the other things, the repositories have like incredibly vast data sets with varying degrees of quality. So just be careful, but yeah, great stuff there.
Another one I'd add, John, sorry, just to not just toot the Maven horn is, I think Makeover Monday. I love Makeover Monday. I'm a huge advocate for it. And I think another one, they upload weekly data sets. So they end up having a very large repository of mostly smaller data sets, which I think makes them accessible, especially for Excel. But the great thing about that, it's a good middle ground between just Kaggle, where you get an empty data set. Sometimes they have some prompts around it. A challenge, which kind of requires some more, in-depth analysis and then visualization. But the cool thing about Makeover Monday is there's already a visual that someone created based on that data set. And all you need to do is kind of give it your own spin. And I like it for two reasons. Obviously, it allows you to sharpen your data viz skills. But I think even more importantly, it makes you think critically about data viz best practices just by looking at the data viz that someone already created based on that data set, right? So it lets you look at an example. What would I have done differently? What works, what doesn't? And then try to kind of put those into practice yourself. And I do all my Makeover Monday entries in Excel. So it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
That's
awesome. Yeah, that's a great ad. And other people are putting some great stuff in here. Yeah, data.gov is another really good one to get some government data. Pete has another suggestion for us. Real world fake data is another good source. So yeah, a lot of stuff here. Census.gov, opendatanetwork.com. I feel like now I want to have a list of just like all the best data sets. Something we probably should put together. So yeah, let's move on to another question, and then probably after this, we're close to getting ready to jump into live Q&A with the audience. So, are there any things that you two use in Excel that you think some people in our audience are like unlikely to know about, but you think is extremely valuable? So like some kind of like a buried hidden gem that you guys use a lot, but maybe is a little bit lesser known than pivot tables and charts and graphs. And maybe Sonali, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
I don't know if this is going to count as like a hidden gem in Excel, but also getting familiar once you're comfortable in Excel, but also exposing yourself to Power Query. Like, I feel like I've used that on a not regular basis to be able to automate a lot of cleanup. And I think that was one of the biggest hidden gem that I learned, I think earlier this year, and then being able to practice and being able to cut back on time that I spend just doing manual cleanups. That's one thing that comes to mind. And another is it's related to a lot of data visualization. It's capable of doing what you already think that it's doing. So instead of creating like very basic charts, there's so many different ways to manipulate it. And I've learned a lot from Enrique's video too. So just putting that out there. So check out his videos. Just being able to create like dashboards, removing grid lines to make it look neater as well. So you can do a lot of dashboarding. It's not just very basic charts. You can make it look very fancy as if you're using Tableau or Power BI. Obviously, it's not the same capabilities, but you can still make it look presentable and use it for like a presentation.
Awesome. And that's a great tips there. Enrique, anything to add to that?
Oof, those were both great. I definitely second Power Query. I think that for myself or for lots of people I've talked to is really just like the next, when you're learning Excel and starting to get comfortable with it, and then you finally learn about Power Query, it just kind of like blows your mind and opens up so many new possibilities. Plus, it's a great, stepping stone into Power BI as well, if that's a path you decide to take. I love the shout on data viz. I'd actually agree with that as well. I think just looking beyond the Excel defaults in terms of data viz is very important. And again, similar to what I was talking about, thinking critically with the make over Monday stuff, like when you create a chart, think about each element in there. Excel is great about, calling out what each element is. You can click on it, you can drag it, you can remove it, you can add it, and just making sure that everything on there is adding value. And if it isn't, just make sure you can subtract it and allow it to focus on the story. Another pro tip I'll add, especially for data-driven presentations, let's call it, if you're going to use Excel charts, for example, in PowerPoint, and you want them to build on top of each other, one thing I'll do is I'll create my base chart, copy, paste it into PowerPoint. Once you do, you can kind of paste as image, and make sure you always keep the same size. Then if you're going to maybe call something out or highlight a bar or make some change, you can make that change to the bar, copy it again, or to the chart, sorry, and then add it to the next slide and just kind of overlay it with the previous image. And that will really allow you to do some great animations, kind of data storytelling with charts, with Excel charts in PowerPoint. And it'll create these like really seamless transitions where nothing really moves except for the things that you're manipulating. So it really allows you to draw attention to where you want the users to be looking. So yeah, guess not really an Excel hidden gem, but something for data presentations.
No, it's awesome. I think these are fantastic tips. And so we're about roughly a half hour into the session. We're trying to be about 45 minutes. I would love to shift into the live Q&A. So we'll go to that questions tab. So folks in the audience, if you could keep populating the questions tab, you're doing a great job already. Hey there, hope you're enjoying the video. Sorry to interrupt. We'll get you right back to it. Right now, Maven Analytics is offering a deal that was just too big not to share it with you. We've got an early Black Friday sale, and you can save up to 50% off of Maven Analytics paid plans. So if you've been considering learning Excel, SQL, Power BI, Python, Tableau, and everything else that you need to become a data analyst or accelerate your career, now is the perfect time. Check it out at mavenanalytics.io. You can see the Black Friday offer in the banner at the top of the screen. You can't miss it. Again, if you're on the fence, there's never been a better time. We don't do a lot of these sales, so I hope that some people will take advantage. Now, enjoy the video. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks. This first question is from Dan, and let's go to Enrique because Enrique actually teaches in MO201 course, so he's a perfect person to talk about this one. Do you guys feel that the MO201, and that's for folks who don't know, that's a Microsoft issued Excel expert certification. Is it either a signal of skills for different stakeholders, or is it a benchmark to drive your Excel learning? And I think in general, would you still recommend folks going after a certification like that, and what are the pros and cons? So yeah, Enrique, perfect person to talk about this one for us.
I love it. Yeah. I think it's not a strict requirement. I'd say the pros, and Sonali kind of touched on this. I touched on this earlier. I think it's a great confidence builder as well. I think passing that certification and having Microsoft say like, hey, you pass for what we would call an Excel expert will really give you a boost. And I think it helps break down those barriers, right, Sonali, like you were mentioning, and kind of defeat that imposter syndrome that you might start feeling, saying, hey, like, yes, I passed this Excel expert certification. Do I think it's the perfect stamp of being an Excel expert? I don't. I think those are some of the cons. It still includes some things that I don't think you necessarily need to learn. So I don't think it's the perfect roadmap for Excel success, but I do think it's a great checkpoint in saying, hey, I'm moving forward in what I'm able to do with Excel. And I think that's important. And and John, I guess I'll defer to you as how valuable it can be maybe for hiring managers, but I do think it's a great thing to point to, right? Like, hey, how proficient are you in Excel? Most people will say 8 out of 10, right? Like that's what the rest of them will say. It's a lot better to at least be able to say, you know what? I have an Excel expert certification issued by Microsoft. Is that going to be what lands you the job? Probably not, but is it a better signal that you can handle yourself in Excel? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I love the like not an overly rosy picture of it, right? Like it's got some benefits, but it's not perfect. And I think you pulled some great points about each one. And yeah, on a hiring manager standpoint, I'll say I've never hired somebody because they had a certificate in anything. That said, I definitely think I have stopped and looked at a resume longer and maybe given somebody an interview, and then maybe that person did get hired because it's a good signal, that they've passed that standard. They've been able to follow a defined curriculum that's focused their study on something that I think is valuable for data analysis. So it's never going to be like, oh, auto job offer because you have it. Some people wish that it was, but I think it definitely could be a good signal. So that's awesome. And Sonali, how about this question for you from Milton? So do you still regularly use VLOOKUP and match as opposed to XLOOKUP and XMatch? Like has XLOOKUP extinguished the old way of doing things, or what do you think about that?
Personally, no. Personally, I still, my fingers still go to a VLOOKUP. It's just a muscle memory. That's just when I end up typing, even if it's going to be an XLOOKUP. I don't think I've used that enough. One of the main reasons is because I go to Power Query to be able to merge my tables, so I don't have to do any of the lookups. But default is still going to be a VLOOKUP or a match formula. I don't think I've used match recently either. Again, Power Query has saved me to be able to type out any formulas, so it does that automatically. But yeah, I'm still using the old ways.
Awesome. And then Enrique, I actually want to throw a similar question to you because Pete had a question in the chat earlier. He said, could somebody explain to me why XLOOKUP is so much better than VLOOKUP, just like in 2 sentences, right? Like explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. What makes XLOOKUP so powerful, Enrique? Because I know you're a big XLOOKUP fan.
Yeah, I have transitioned from VLOOKUP to XLOOKUP. I think if you're just picking these up, it's easier to learn because the arguments the function need are, what value are you looking up? Where are you looking for it? And then what column do you want to return the values from? And I think that's much easier than the first 2 steps are the same, right? What are you trying to look up? Where is it? And then how many columns over is whatever you're trying to pull. So I think it's much easier to be able to just reference a column. And then there's the other benefits, like it defaults to an exact match, which is always nice. And you can look up, stuff to the left of the lookup column. But I think mostly it's just a lot more intuitive to say, look for this here, return this, period.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really good, just like the intuitiveness and the easy readability of it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm an old dog, so I'm still using a lot of VLOOKUP myself. So it's hard for me to learn new tricks at this point. But I love that explanation. How about
I think I might transition after this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think I might transition after this.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. So this one's from Brian. Thoughts on Google Sheets and or using Excel on a Mac? Like, do you have a strong preference for each? Let's go Sonali first, because I know Enrique plays with both a little bit. What do you think, Sonali? Do you totally lean Excel? Do you ever use Google Sheets?
So for my personal projects, I do tend to go to Google Sheets. So I'm a personal finance geek. So I love tracking anything related to my finances in the Google Sheets document. Also because I can open it up on my phone as well if I ever wanted to just look at how I'm doing, make myself feel better. But yeah, that's where Google Sheets come into play. But in terms of Mac, I don't use a Mac, so I can't really comment on that component. But when it comes to doing work itself, I am very used to using Excel at work. So that's what my default setting is when it comes to any professional projects or, again, on the job kind of training.
Awesome. Enrique, yeah, what's your take between the two? Are they complete like alternatives that they work just as well, or are there things that one does better than the other?
I think I'll start by addressing Excel on Mac. I don't think it's a perfect like equal for Excel on PC. So I'm a pretty firm. If I'm using my Mac, I even don't even like opening Excel. I know Chris does use Excel on his Mac a lot more, and I think it's mostly a getting used to thing. But I just believe that Excel goes on PC. I will say Sheets sometimes gets a lot of hate, but I think it's very capable. It even has some things that it does better than Excel. Granted, there's some things that it doesn't, but I think it's a great tool. Especially, most people forget because everyone has Excel that Excel costs money, right? Google Sheets doesn't. So I think it's a great way to learn. You can learn those same foundations. It has the same formula language, access to the same charts, even though the buttons are slightly different than you would Excel. So if you want to start there, I think you're not making a mistake whatsoever. And other thing I'll say, just to kind of backtrack, I know we're talking about what's the best way to get hands-on practice. Sonali, I love that you talked about, being a finance geek and I think become a data analyst in your own life. You have data around you and use it, right? You don't have to be a data analyst to analyze data. So just take advantage of that. And that's a great way of, practicing in a way that's relevant and that will keep you engaged because you have something to gain from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think you both had really good points. I think one thing that keeps me using both, I'd say when I'm using my machine laptop, I am usually using Excel. I just think for me it's been so long that I'm using it. I sometimes get annoyed at the slight differences with Sheets, but Sheets is so good. I love, Sonali, that you said anything that you want to do on your phone in the cloud, I'll be at my kid's doctor's office and I want to take some notes. I track their height and weight over time, just make sure they're healthy and just remember this stuff. Hey, was this normal for my daughter? Okay, my son's here, is all that stuff. And just being able to pull out your phone and pop it into a sheet. I love that. So yeah, really, really good stuff here. Next question we've got here is about Python and Excel and artificial intelligence. And so Difata asks, basically, how much do you need to care about this stuff going forward? Do you need to know Python in Excel? Do you need to understand how to use Copilot to stay up to date? If you don't learn these things, are your Excel skills becoming the dinosaur? Are you going to go out of favor with employers? I'll say, do either of you have strong opinions about how important this stuff is?
I can try to answer that. One thing I would say, I have not exposed myself, maybe I should at some point, expose myself to Python in Excel as of yet, or even Python itself. I've tried learning a couple of years ago, but quite frankly, I don't know Python. Maybe in the future, if I want to go the data scientist route, at the moment, I don't. So I try to see what I need to learn based on job requirements that are out there. So if you ever feel like you're losing touch with what's required to be relevant in the job market, just search titles that you want to apply for, whether you're looking now or in the future. Search titles, review some job descriptions, see what skill sets keep coming up, what tools are being mentioned over and over. That's what you should focus on. It's not like Excel, it's not Tableau, it's not Power BI. It's what you want out of your career growth. It's going to be different for every single person. So you're going to create that path for yourself based on the job that you want, based on the career trajectory that you have for yourself. So it's not one answer fits all, but that's my take on it. In terms of AI or Gen AI, use it to your advantage as a personal assistant. And that's what I've done. every time I'm like not sure about my career path or not sure if I'm learning the right things, I'm putting it in Gen AI, having it like brainstorm. This is what my thought process is. Does it make sense? Or try to argue with me on this and see if I can defend my point. If I can, I'm going to keep going on the right path. So use it to your advantage. Don't use it as like you're fighting against Gen AI. I don't think you'll win, but eventually use it as your own best friend. I think it'll get you further.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. Enrique, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, one thing I will add, I think both for Copilot and for Excel, especially if you're dealing with maybe potentially sensitive information with financial analysis, and if we're talking about job market stuff, they both require going through Microsoft's cloud, right? And I think it's just a security issue. Not that I'm sure they'll come back and say, no, your data is safe, and that might be true. But the reality is that you can't just do it locally. So Copilot, if you're going to use Copilot in Excel, it requires you to save that file to either OneDrive or SharePoint and have it automatically update, and it's going to analyze all that in Microsoft servers. Same with Python and Excel. You don't need to save it to OneDrive or anything like that, but all of its computing is done on Microsoft's end, and you can't even use any Python and Excel without internet access. So I think because of those, there's no need to worry about that professionally yet, because I don't think people will be using it for that right now. Maybe that'll change. Maybe it's safe anyway, but I wouldn't be overly concerned. It's fun though.
Awesome.
Python and Excel's got some cool.
Yeah, I think they're really, really smart. Like both of you guys thinking about the upside and where things are going, and also things to be worried about, some of those pitfalls. So it's a really good balanced couple of answers here. Last one, let's get one more question in here. There was a great one here. Yeah, from Jeremy. So what 3 key skills do you have to master before you venture onto advanced visualization tools like Power BI or Tableau? Sonali, maybe you could start with a couple of them.
I can't even think of, well, I can if it's not just technical skills. I would start off again with understanding the data structure. I don't know what word you want to use to describe that, but just understanding how data is structured in either it's Excel or a CSV file, or when you're pulling it into those platforms like Tableau, understand what they mean. If it's a text, what it's supposed to look like. If it's a date, like what that's supposed to look like and what works best. Second, communication. I don't think that's ever going to go out of the picture, is learning how to communicate your insights. And you can create data visualizations, again, in Excel. If you're able to master how to create data visualizations, so the concept of what works and what doesn't work, how to use color effectively, all those kind of fun stuff, you're going to use the same learnings and same methods, just different tools. So learning that. And when it comes to Power BI, if you're comfortable with Excel and Power Query, I think that might be an easier transition. And when it comes to Tableau, I would say Excel, SQL, and then Tableau, because I think the way you write the syntax or the formulas in Tableau is similar with SQL. And the way you write SQL, if you understand Excel, you can use the same logic and put it into your SQL learning as well. So it all just ties together.
Yeah,
it does.
Totally agree. Enrique, any final words to add on that one? And this will be our last question, unfortunately, folks. We're going to hop to the next session.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, understanding data structures, table relationships, and I think at the end of the day, and it ties with the communication that Sonali was talking about, just knowing about database best practices. I think Power BI and Tableau are great enablers of being able to do great things in communicating with data. So it's important to get the most out of those tools by being able to visualize things effectively through those best practices.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was part of our open campus event where we ran 24 sessions in front of a live audience over the course of 2 weeks. It was a ton of fun. We did all these live sessions and we opened up our entire learning platform for free. You did not need a paid account to take advantage of all the courses. So folks could learn Excel, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, Python, etc. All the stuff that you need to learn data analysis skills and take your career to the next level. If you missed it this year, keep an eye out. We'll definitely be doing this again next year, probably again in October. We would love to see you there. And the last thing that I'll leave you with, if you're looking to take your skills to the next level right now, and you've been on the fence about a Maven Analytics paid plan, we are currently running our early Black Friday sale. This is the absolute best time to pay for Maven Analytics if you want to, so don't miss out. You'll have the opportunity to save up to 50% on paid plans, which is a pretty great opportunity. You can check out all the details at mavenanalytics.io. Just look for the early Black Friday banner at the top of the site. You can't miss it. Hope that we'll see some of you there as well. Thanks for watching.